specific seasons that there's fruit that are better in the winter, or better in the summer, better in the fall, better in the spring. And in that same way, imagine we're a tree that can bear fruit in every single season we're in. And as a Christian, that's when we're doing well, when things are financially well, or times when we're struggling and we're under stress and pressure, whether it be from school, from our marriage, from our finances, whether we're in a drought or when we're flourishing, that we can produce fruit and be lively in every single season that we're in. And so the focus today is God doesn't plant trees. We're not fully grown from the start. But it's God plants the seed. He plants the seed, and from there we see it starts growing roots. It sprouts up a little bit. Some more time passes, another season passes, and you see it's about 1 foot high, 2 feet high. A couple years later, more years come, more time passes, and it's sprouting leaves. And at one point, it bears fruit. And it's lively, and it's flourishing. And again, so many times in our own lives, we want to be the tree. We want to be fruitful. We want to be lively. But again, God doesn't plant trees. He plants the seed. And there we take the time to grow, to mature, to build roots, to build our character, to build who we are. You aren't the same person you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that just says to how much time has passed, how we've grown and matured through this process. And so, again, being thankful to my mom to know that how to plant is we get the ground, the soil ready, we dig a hole, we put the seeds in, and we cover it up. We put fertilizer, we put mulch, manure, whatever it be, to help it grow, and we water it. And so, being in our uncomfortable series, what's uncomfortable about planting a seed? Being that seed is that we go through so much in our lives in that same way that God's planting a seed, digging that hole, putting us there. It feels that everything that He's covering us up with is just burying us. In the same way that someone plants a seed is the same way if I dig a hole and I put a casket inside and I cover it up. It's buried. Being the seed starts out that same way. And how can that ever be comfortable? Being under all this pressure, being under all this stress, again, be from school and our marriage, our relationships, stress from our finances, or even just being under the weather and being sick and being physically hurt. All of this piles on and it buries us and it buries us and it covers us. And it's almost like we're dying inside. In the same way that we bury a casket. But in reality, when we know that there's a purpose, that what if everything on top of us that feels like so much and we're just dug deep under the ground, under everything happening in our lives, that we're not buried, but He's planting us. He's planting us there for a reason. I know with my mom, when we would plant something, it wasn't there just because she wanted to plant something. It was either a vegetable where we wanted to grow fruit, or we wanted to grow tomatoes, zucchinis, whatever it be, or it was a flower in the front of the house where, hey, this is going to make the front of a house look nice. That planting something has a purpose. That there's a reason that where we are is where we're supposed to be. But so many times, again, all this pressure and being covered up, we just want to curl up and die. We don't want to be there. And so we take ourselves out of where God has planted us, and we try to do it on our own. We take ourselves out, we uproot ourselves, and we try to figure this out on our own. But being planted, again, takes time for us to grow these roots, to then begin to sprout. It's when you plant a seed, it's not until afterwards do you see that it's actually growing. Not after some time has passed do you see that it's alive and well. But if you were to bury anything else, like a coin, it's just going to be there, stay there, buried. And so again, I want to look at verse 3 specifically. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaves does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. That life is going to come at us every which way. It's going to throw everything on top of us, and it's going to try to put us down and bury us 6 feet under. But when our perspective can change, and when we can see that God has us here for a reason, that He's planted us here, that we can grow and mature, and again, growing isn't comfortable. Having problems in our lives isn't comfortable. Have to worry about our finances day to day, or to be in arguments in a relationship and try to want to do better. Even just not seeing fruit is uncomfortable. But I want you guys to hear this, because Pastor Sam, Pastor AJ, we don't come up here to say a message or say something just because. But it's something that does speak to us. It speaks to me that there's a reason, and we're planted here to grow roots and to mature in this season. And so to remember, we're not buried under all that we're going through, all the circumstances, the problems, the situations, the good things that come on top of us. But we're truly planted by God here in this place to do something for a reason. And so now I'm going to look back at the first 2 verses, because if we now can see that we're planted, we're not buried by our circumstances, situations, and problems, but we're planted here to grow and to mature, that what is part of that process that we look at. And so again, we're going to look at verse 1 and 2, because I want you guys to think about some of these questions that I'm going to ask. And if it makes you feel uncomfortable, that's all right, because it makes me extremely uncomfortable to really think about these things and to look at these things. So I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on His law day and night. And that first part, who does not walk in step with the wicked, and in New King James, right, who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. In verse 3, he says he is like planted, he is a tree planted by streams of water. And we know water is something that tree needs to grow, to mature, to become lively. And it's right there next to the water source. And I want to ask, who are you walking with? Because we want to look at where we are, where we're placed, where we're oriented compared and oriented with God. Because we know that God is going to be the one to water us, to build us, to grow us, to mature us. Because what if we were planted by the streams of water and we never needed the storm? We never needed the rain. The question my mom always asked when we were gardening is like, hey, Jay, can you look up the weather? Is it going to rain? Because if it's going to rain, we didn't have to go out there and water the plants. We knew that the water was coming. In that same way in our own lives, how many times do we wait for the storm, the problems, the situation to come down pouring on us, and that's when we feel faithful? That's when we see ourselves, okay, we made it through and now we're flourishing. Because the storm came through, rained on us, and we got our water. And in that season, we see ourselves as fruitful. But when we look at it and we orient ourselves and we place ourselves next to the living stream, the stream of water that God is continually supplying us, it doesn't matter if the storm comes. It doesn't matter if the rain comes. Whether it's a sun shower or a thunderstorm, we're always going to be supplied with the water that we need. So I ask, who are you walking with? Because it says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. I'm going to ask you specifically because who are you walking with? That directly and heavily influences our own personal walk. I always saw it having two younger siblings. Whatever I did, they followed. That was just the reality of me being an older brother, the oldest brother. That if I walked right, they walked right with me. If I walked left, they walked left with me. And that whoever we're walking with, our family, our friends, the community we have at the workplace, at school, wherever we have our hobbies, that heavily influences our own personal walk. Whether we like it or not, the amount of time we spend with them reflects in who we are. And so if you ask, if you're that person, then you're kind of already answering that question. Maybe we need to look at who we're walking with and how we're walking. Because the next part of this verse says, or stand in the way that sinners take, and in the other version, nor stands in the path of sinners. And a path is something that's created over time as we continually walk over it over and over and over and over again. That's how you make a foot trail, a path, that shortcut you take to school, that shortcut you take to work, that it's been walked over years and years and years, and it's become a pattern. It's become a part of our path, or part of our lives, and just a habit. And it's, blessed is the man that does not stand in the path of sinners, doesn't stand in the path that we created, the habit that we've made, that even if we're not walking on that path, we're more likely to just fall back in that pattern. More likely to continue what we're doing when we know it isn't right. So again, it goes back to, how do we orient ourselves? How do we place ourselves in a place where we can be planted fruitfully and be close to that living water? Close to that continuous stream of water so that we can have true growth. And the last part of this verse says, or sit in the company of mockers, or take the seat of the scornful. And it goes from walking to standing to now taking a seat. In that same way, sometimes we're going about our lives and we just need to take a seat. But is that with the right community, with the right people, with those that influence you in a good and better way? Again, sit in the company of mockers, those that are looking at others and judging how they are or what they do with our own prideful and whatever you have it mindset. When we look at someone and try to help them, and in reality, are we